Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Tibetan Buddhist Society's introductory hearing. Hope you're all well. So we'll just start with a few minutes of breathing meditation, just to relax, be present, settle the mind. There's a lot going on in the world. Take some time just to relax, settle. So just breathing gently at your leisure. Breathing in and breathing out at your own pace. Relax your body. Try and keep your spine straight and your chin slightly tucked in, not having the head too high, too low. Just relax. If possible, if you like, with your arms and hands resting in front in your lap, with the right hand over the left. It's on now. Okay. So we'll just begin with some more breathing meditation. Just relax. Breathing in, breathing out. Just watching the rising and falling of the breath. Just enjoy the sensation of the breath coming and going. Relax. There's a lot happening in the world, just let it go. Relax now. Be in the present, where you are. Just observing the incoming and outgoing of the breath. Nothing more. Just enjoy breathing. The wonderful sensation of the air coming in and going out, the rising and falling of the breath. Just relax the body, relax the mind. And be where you are. Just enjoy breathing in and breathing out. Nothing more. Just be where you are. Just breathe and relax. Just watching the rising and falling of the breath. The human form, at peace with itself, is more precious than the rarest gem. Cherish your body. It is yours this one time only. The human body is one with difficulty and is easy to lose. All worldly things are brief, like lightning in the sky. And you must know this life as the tiny splash of a raindrop. A thing of beauty disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore, set your goal and make use of every day and night to achieve it. So last week we looked at life, this precious human rebirth. This week we're looking at death, the end of this life. Not to freak out about it, not to bring on any unwarranted stress, panic, any of those things. Death is a natural part of life. So we need to look at it clearly, objectively, know what it is, not hide from it, deny it. No need to rush rapidly to it. Enjoy life, make the major use of these precious moments we have. But death is definite. It will come. Shakyamuni Buddha in the Transmission of the Vinaya explains, collection ends in dispersal. Rising ends in falling. Meeting ends in separation. Birth ends in death. So we need to know that death is definite. It is part of impermanence. All things are impermanent. We know that things change constantly, moment by moment, day by day, season by season, year after year. Even in our breathing meditation, we observe the rising and falling of the breath. The in-breath is impermanent. It becomes the out-breath. The out-breath is impermanent. And we breathe in again. This life of ours, constantly changing, moment by moment, cell by cell. From the moment we're born, we change constantly. From being a baby, hours pass, days pass, weeks, months and years. Everything changes. We change, everything around us changes. This is impermanence. Life is a dependent arising. Death is a dependent arising. Everything, all phenomena depend on causes and conditions and parts. And the imputation of mind. Therefore, everything is dependent. Nothing exists from its own side. All things are dependent. Death depends on life. Life depends on death. This constant cycle of rebirth life, death, the intermediate state, the rebirth, the next life, and the next death. Constantly changing. So let's look at death. Death is definite. The reason to consider death is to make this life worthwhile, not to freak out and panic and try to run away from death. Knowing that death is definite and happens to everyone, all sentient beings, can give us the appreciation of this precious human rebirth. To utilize it while we have the opportunity. So we can think the best way to utilize this precious human rebirth is practicing the Holy Dharma, but not some strange spiritual trip, but just benefiting sentient beings with the intention, with the motivation for oneself and all beings to step by step attain enlightenment. So by appreciating death, we can appreciate life, and that all those around us are impermanent. And that knowledge is power. If we know death, we can utilize opportunities. So if we think about it, no one escapes death. Lord Buddha died, Lord Jesus, all the great religious figures, spiritual teachers, yogis, yoginis, all queens and kings, emperors, presidents, prime ministers, ordinary people, all animals, everything living dies. If we look back 150 years, all human beings who were alive at that time are now gone. And if we look forward, think 150 years from now, all human beings who are presently here, alive, will all have passed away. So we should utilize our precious human rebirth for the benefit of oneself and all sentient beings. So if we think about death, the causes of death are many, and many of the things that keep us alive can be the causes of death. Currently, the big freak out is COVID and the death and sickness that it brings. But many of the other things that we rely upon and think of as good for us or healthy, much of the food we eat can lead step by step to sickness and death. And in the law of cause and effect, karma, we don't know what's coming next, what accidents, what sicknesses, causes of death are many. The time of death. Time of death is uncertain. We don't know when we're going to die. Could be at any time. Could be years away. Or could just be a breath away. If we breathe out and don't breathe in again, we die. But don't freak out. This is just useful information. So we think, while I have this opportunity, while I have this precious, unbelievable human rebirth, I should utilize it. Thinking of the welfare of all sentient beings. And the Dharma is the intention to liberate all sentient beings from cyclic existence, the state of enlightenment, beyond the cycle of birth and death and suffering. So if we make this our motivation, then our life becomes very useful and meaningful. And death isn't a great problem. So contemplate death. Death is definite, and that its time is uncertain, and that at the time of death, really, only one's precious mind of bodhicitta, the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and to attain enlightenment, is the best thing we can have with us at death. Because at death, nothing we've actually accumulated in life is of benefit. We cannot take our wealth, or our friends, or our high position in life. All these things are left behind. But our good heart, love and compassion, goes with our mind continuum. So recognize this opportunity that we have, knowing that death is definite. The time of death is uncertain. And that at death, only one's mind of Dharma, motivation, the thought of benefiting others can be a benefit for us. So I'd like to just read a few of the wonderful verses regarding the fact that death is definite. These are the sayings from Lord Buddha on impermanence. All the Buddhas and solitary realizers, even the Buddha's hearers, have had to leave their bodies. What need to speak of ordinary beings? Wherever you may stay, there is no place not reached by death. Not in space, not in the ocean, not even hiding in a mountain. So human beings cannot run away from death. Those of the past, present and future all pass on by leaving their bodies. The wise one, realizing the impermanence of these, practices the Dharma with thorough analysis. So we contemplate Dharma, whether it is useful, beneficial. So we listen or read and think and meditate. Is death definite? When is the time of death? And what will happen? What is of benefit at the time of death? Shantideva, in his Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds, writes, remaining neither day nor night, this life is constantly slipping by and never getting any longer. Why will death not come to one like me? As the flow of a powerful flood cannot be reversed, so the passing of the human life cannot be turned around again. So we cannot become younger. We cannot go back. Things are impermanent. All things are impermanent. And it's very useful in this precious human rebirth of ours to look after our health and our conditions so that we can stay healthy and benefit sentient beings. And it is our mind, our motivation, the thought to benefit all sentient beings, the wish to benefit all sentient beings, that is the most precious thought we can have, and the actions we take to benefit others. And the greatest benefit for all sentient beings is the attainment of enlightenment. And enlightenment is a state of mind. So with this precious human rebirth, we can study and think and meditate and gradually bring our mind to that state of enlightenment. Enlightenment is a dependent arising. So then we can contemplate what does happen at the time of death. The dissolution of the elements and the aggregates that make up our body and mind. And the four elements of earth, water, fire and air. And at death, our mind, our subtle mind, separates from this body of impermanence. And as the aggregates form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors and consciousness dissolve, and the elements with them, the earth element, that is our body, the water element, all the fluids in our body, the fire element, the warmth that our body generates, and the air, the breath. All step by step dissolve. And then in the Buddhist tradition, after death, we enter the intermediate state, the bardo. And then step by step, attain another rebirth. So our Dharma practice is to utilize all of these opportunities to study and know this precious human rebirth, to know life, to know death, to know the nature of suffering, its causes, but to know there is the cessation of suffering that Lord Buddha taught. And to practice and meditate on this path. And we look at dependent arising, we look at conventional truth, we look at ultimate truth, by studying impermanence. We can see the unfindability of things. That everything arises from causes, conditions, parts, and the imputing mind or consciousness that labels all of these dependent arisings. And by refining the mind with clarity and awareness, knowing that everything being a dependent arising is therefore not existing from its own side. That all phenomena lack inherent existence. Nothing exists from its own side. That everything is a dependent arising. Watch the rising and falling of the breath. So many causes and conditions. And parts of the human body required just for this gentle act of breathing. And know that if it is a dependent arising, it is empty or lacking inherent existence. If it is a dependent arising, it cannot exist separate, independent, on its own. Life is a dependent arising, and death is a dependent arising. And they are all dependent on causes and conditions and parts, and the mind, imputing the labels life and death. So make every breath, every moment useful, meaningful, beneficial on your journey to enlightenment. Breathing in the suffering and worry and stress of all sentient beings, dissolving it in emptiness, and breathing out all good conditions for all sentient beings. And with the wish constantly, moment by moment, thinking, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, freedom from suffering, and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is without suffering. And may they abide in the state of enlightenment, beyond duality. So knowing that death is definite and its time of arrival uncertain, and that the only thing that is reliable and useful at the time of death is one's mind, bodhicitta, the wish for all beings to attain enlightenment. Generate that strong thought, that wish, aspiration. To liberate all beings from suffering, from fear, from stress and sorrow. So settle the mind, relax the breath, relax the body. Gently breathe in and breathe out. So relax. Relax the mind. relax the breath. Observe the subtle impermanence of the breath. And knowing that death is definite should give us energy and enthusiasm for our practice. And make the motivation that in this life and all future lives, I will aspire to the attainment of enlightenment to benefit all living beings. So I thought next week we will be looking at refuge in the Buddhist tradition, refuge in the Buddha, the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the support group for the Dharma. So we can just do a few short minutes of meditation now, if you like, just visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha. So just visualize in front, about 10 feet away in space. Using your mind, visualize a beautiful, clear blue sky, and there, just in front, level with your forehead, is Shakyamuni Buddha sitting on a lotus, a moon cushion, and a sun cushion. And the lotus, moon, and sun, and Shakyamuni Buddha are all in the nature of light. Shakyamuni Buddha is sitting cross-legged, full lotus. His right hand rests over his right knee in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand rests in his lap with a begging bowl on top. Shakyamuni Buddha is wearing the 3 beautiful golden saffron robes. Looking directly at you, smiling. Feel the blessings of Shakyamuni Buddha radiating through your body, gently, the nature of light transforming your mind, blessing your mind. And that the lotus that Shakyamuni Buddha sits on represents renunciation. The moon disk represents bodhicitta, the conventional mind of enlightenment, wishing to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And the sun disk represents wisdom, the mind of enlightenment. Feel the blessings, waves of inspiring strength from Shakyamuni Buddha. Great love, great compassion, joy, blessing your body and your mind. And then imagine, visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the nature of light on the lotus, moon and sun, comes forward, becoming smaller and smaller, and sits directly above your head, the crown of your head. Now Shakyamuni Buddha, about the size of a thumbnail, in the nature of light, on the throne, on the lotus, moon and sun, comes down into your heart and remains there. Feel the blessings of Shakyamuni Buddha. And feel your continuum of body and mind blessed by Shakyamuni Buddha. And then we can think and dedicate the energy, the merit, from listening, thinking and meditating on the path to enlightenment. Dedicate it to the enlightenment of all beings. By this virtue, may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit, and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. May the precious, superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, and not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously. So next week we'll look at refuge. Why take refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha, the benefits. And so now, if anybody has any questions, we have a few minutes to take your questions. There's a question from last week that I didn't get around to answering on what is dependent arising. So everything is dependent arising. So if everything you perceive, everything you think is dependent. So dependent arising basically means nothing exists on its own independently. And you can look at this in everything that you've ever known is dependent. And everything you will ever know is dependent. All things are dependent on causes and conditions. And on parts, and then finally on the mind that imputes and labels everything. So nothing exists from its own side. So it's not possible for anything to be completely independent. And if it is a dependent arising, then it is empty of inherent existence, or existing from its own side. And that's the big spanner in the works, is that generally we look at everything as existing from its own side. So we don't look at the complexity of things, the causes and conditions of them, the parts that make up the thing or the thought. Everything is just dependent. So if you have any other questions this week, got plenty of time. Just wait for any questions. Yeah, so an example of a dependent arising is, say, a human being, ourselves, then we are dependent on our parents to actually take rebirth. We're dependent on our parents. And then we're dependent on their parents. They were dependent on their parents. So things go back, further. In this life, when we're born, we're dependent on our body, and we're dependent on air, we're dependent on food, we're dependent on shelter and warmth and friends and family. So all of these things are dependent. They're all the causes and conditions. And then our body, so it is dependent on food and shelter and breathing and water constantly. And all of those things are dependent. They all come from somewhere. Food comes from farms and orchards. All these things in agriculture require farmers, transportation, supermarkets. All of these things require transportation, requires trucks. These have to be built. Somebody had to think of that. So everything is dependent on everything. And on it goes. And death is dependent on life, but life is dependent on death. This life is dependent on the previous life's death. And then everything depends on the imputation of mind, the labeling of it. And everything is like that. All things are dependent arisings. There's nothing that is from its own side existing. So even space is still a dependent arising. It's dependent on its parts, all the directions that space goes. Which is why in the Heart Sutra, the Buddha, it was explained that form is empty and emptiness is form. And form is no other than emptiness, and emptiness is no other than form. But that emptiness is not nothingness. Emptiness is being empty of inherent existence or existing from its own side. So form depends on emptiness, but emptiness is also a dependent arising. Emptiness is empty of existing from its own side. Emptiness is the emptiness of dependent arisings. Therefore, emptiness, there is the emptiness of emptiness itself. Something to contemplate. So do we have any questions this week? So if there are no questions, we can leave it there. Hope you find some benefit in these little talks and meditations, and you can utilize them in your daily life. Take care during the week, and hopefully we'll see you again next Sunday. The days all meld into each other in these lockdown times. So thank you very much for being there, and enjoy